and tell us about your budget and.
Yeah, they appear to be AWOL, but I think they're hiding in the back. But I am joined here by Lone Win, and I think
There they are. They're
Lane
waving.
is waving. I did not prepare remarks, and I think that is because the team that is currently hiding from you, you know probably more intimately than any other group, and that you are not afraid to reach out to them. But I would like to take this time to acknowledge them and thank them for welcoming me and all they do for you guys on a regular basis. So I think everyone has heard of and has met Andrea Blackman, our Chief Diversity Officer, Tom Edelman, Budget Director. Obviously, thanks to the entire budget team. And a shout out to ITS. I know they've gotten a lot of love, but I don't know that folks realized we implemented a new budget system this year in about 2 weeks, and Plan B involved an Excel spreadsheet, and Plan C involved a typewriter. So it was questionable, but we were really thankful to get that out. Also new to the team is Abraham Westcott, who is our new public property manager. Everyone knows Michelle Bosch, the treasurer, Kevin Brown, financial accountability. Janine Kaufman is the chief accountant. MJ Wiggins is what I affectionately call the deputy of disaster. She does anything burning is her, ARPA, tornado, flood, all of it. And then finally, she has 3 names, but we all know her by one, Talia, who none of this could be done. So just want to thanks to everyone. And in the spirit of hopefully catching up on time, I'm good with just taking questions if that works for everyone.
That works for me. Questions? Councilmember Samora.
Thank you. I'm going to start on the good side before I go to the tough stuff. There is a request in your budget for a treasury management systems. And looking at the audit report, this system was required to be able to make sure that we have a better handle on our cash management. But I see that that was not funded. What does that do to your compliance? And I thought it's very critical, and I'm surprised that it's not there. That is one. The other thing is that on this personnel savings question that I'm going to keep asking everybody, same thing happened with finance. And again, we're still looking at about $1 million difference in 1 million to 1.5 million also. And so my question specifically procedurally to you is this. When people submit their budget and they have all these salary savings, are they allowed to do budget reallocation during the year to non-personnel? Is this something that has to go through finance, or is this something that the department can just say, we have $1 million here, but we have vacancy, we're not filling it, but we're going to use it for repairs or constituent services? What is the procedure for that? Because there is salary savings everywhere, and it's becoming a lot. Then the other question, okay, so what is it again? Then you have a legislative position in your ask. This legislative position is supposed to work with council. My question specifically is that not a position that should be in the council office? And if you can explain to me in detail what exactly that is. And then the last question, because I know that people may have questions for you, is that in addition to about $750,000 that I see in specific consultant fees for different studies and stuff, there's another $250,000 that just says various things that could happen. Have we identified what these are, or is this just a plug? I know I've asked a lot of questions. I think you wrote them down. Thank you.
I did, and I'm going to answer them in a whole random way. So I'll start with the Treasury management system. From a compliance perspective, you can always do better. I think the reality we've faced, and we appreciate the mayor's office and the rest of the people that participate in the budget process kind of giving us a little grace on this one. I think maybe we got a little ahead of ourselves and we're just not ready for the ask yet. I would expect you'll probably see that in a 4% paper in the next 3 or 6 months as we kind of build out what the actual need is around that ask. We have a functioning system. Can we do better? Absolutely. That's why we're asking for it, but we're trying to refine that goal before we come to you with that ask. So that's that one. For the vacancy piece, I think I'm going to answer 2 questions at once, hopefully. Technically, departments are supposed to get budget approval when they move funding from non-personnel to personnel lines. And what I struggled with when I got here, and why you'll see that ask, and why you asked about that $250,000 for whatever, is we, as the finance department, never budgeted for kind of the one-off. So when you think about just in the 9 months I've been here, we needed funding for a consultant for Speedway, around Titans things that weren't actually in the budget. So what we were doing as a department was using salary savings. And it was very difficult for me as the finance department, the model that we're supposed to be for every other department, to not earmark our own funding source. So that 250 is kind of for the one-offs that is not new, that have always come up, that we've always just charged to salary savings. And yes, departments should ask us, and frequently we do use non-personnel savings and personnel savings to fund non-personnel asks.
So the follow-up, because I'm sorry, Chair. I'm sorry. So since this is a common trend, and we see a lot in salary savings, and that's what I'm saying this year, is that do we not have a policy of taking salary savings and say, if you don't need the position, don't budget it until you need it? And as a follow-up, let's say we take the salary savings, for example, and the department find out they do need the position or find the candidate, can they not come back and ask for it at that time?
So what we do as a department is we budget all of our positions and the full value is in there, but we also come up with a realistic hiring plan. How long do we think it's going to actually take to fill these positions? What is the value of the savings of that timing? I think if we could expand that organizational wide, it would make planning more efficient. The struggle is, like I said, we've had our new budget system for 2 months. It doesn't have that feature right now. So that's something we're working with HR, ITS. How do we, technology is our struggle on this one. We don't have, call balls and strikes here. We don't have a really great vacancy report on any given day. You know, the data that each department's harvesting is better than anything that we have in our system. So as we advance technologically, I think we'll answer some of those problems and come up with organizational-wide policies. Right now, it's hard to ask that of other departments when we don't have the technologies to support it.
Good answer. Other questions? I will say that at the suggestion, I think, of Kristen Wilson, I have asked Shannon Hall from Metro HR to come tomorrow to speak about kind of the whole pay scale and the hiring process in general. So we will be able to revisit that at that point as well. But it is helpful to hear that from the finance director's perspective. So I appreciate that question. Are there any other questions? Councilmember Hurt.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. I see that you all have budgeted money for a disparity study. So what do you do with the disparity studies? How do you turn those recommendations into tangible impacts?
I could attempt to answer that question, but the most loquacious Michelle Lane will do a much better version of that. I know it is a requirement as part of procurement to be done every 5 years, but she will describe the process and the purpose better than I ever will.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to talk about the disparity study process. I know Councilmember Hurt, we've talked about this several times, and I know that it's something that you have a lot of interest in. The factual predicate study process, or disparity study as most people know it, is something that we are required legally to do every 5 years to support the programming that we have in place for Black and brown, women-owned, minority-owned businesses. And basically what it does is it helps us to ensure that we are placing targets in our procurement solicitations that are not just, some pie-in-the-sky number. It's an actual number that is based on the actual marketplace availability. And that's important. We want to have good partnerships with our vendors, and we want to say to them, support our efforts toward diversity and procurement equity. And the best way to do that is to seek participation that is consistent with the actual availability of firms. We don't want to tell them to go get 25% or 45% for a specific purchase when the market will only support 12 or 13. And so that's what the disparity study process does for us, is gives us those actual statistics and those real numbers in actual procurement sectors so that we are making informed decisions about the availability estimates that we're going to place on specific solicitations. There was a time when we were, using that disparity study process for the development of recommendations. We now have a program, and so we have shifted the way that we use the disparity study is strictly so that we can get those aspirational goals and those project-by-project goals.
Yes, I know with the EBO that we passed, but, instead of necessarily doing the study, I want to see more intentionality to make sure that we do provide those opportunities to those small minority businesses. And I'm just wondering if we could use funds to ensure that that is possible, maybe through some training for small businesses or whatever, in order to build the capacity in order for us to fulfill the requirements that we have already set place. Because while we have it there and we make the attempts, we still are falling short. And as opposed to studying it continuously, because we're going to get the same results, as we've had before, how can we put that to work and make sure that we come up with some better results?
Thank you. Good
my
question. And Ms. Lane, if I remember correctly, the second disparity study we got a report on, it doesn't seem like it's been 5 years, but maybe it has, built on the numbers that basically said we were doing a terrible job and
That's
said
right.
It's not good enough just to set the goals. We also have to work to build capacity and to work on our outreach. Can you talk a little bit about those pieces, capacity building and outreach? And will this study possibly expand even further on those and require funding to provide those?
As a point of clarification, the factual predicate study process, again, is a statistical process. I mean, it is helping us to develop the numbers, those actual targets needed to support our programming legally, a process that has been blessed by the Supreme Court of the U.S. So we want to make sure that we're using that process to support the program, but also to protect Metro's best interest, which is, my first charge as the purchasing agent, which is to work in Metro's best interest. So I'll say that in terms of capacity building, outreach and training, we've developed significant partnerships with various firms, organizations, I should say, where we provide training opportunities to different disadvantaged or minority woman-owned businesses who seek to do business with the city. I certainly do not want to steal the thunder of the finance director, but there is also included in this budget a mentor protege request, and it is a direct result of a recommendation from the previous disparity study and the pursuant program. And the purpose of that is really to help us focus on some of those smaller businesses who find themselves relegated to subcontracting roles, but who are very interested in growing and developing their businesses, folks that we know we have partnerships with and who've had some relative success in Metro, providing them with some resources and some services around training, looking at what specific needs they have, helping them to secure those information and details to help them grow in that specific area so that they can now elevate from subcontracting to potentially prime contracting roles with the city.
And that's a conversation you and I are going to have about,
Yeah.
including that on our procurement form. Councilmember Hurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank you, Ms. Lane and Director Flannery. I really appreciate what you all have done, and I have seen progress over the 6.5 years that I've been on the council, so I am pleased of where we're going. But in this, it just says disparity study, and then it talks about small businesses. We just heard the mayor's office talk about how they've had difficulty finding people. We know we in a great resignation period these days. Could we find a way to where we can make sure that we are hiring individuals, and not just the contracting aspect of it, but making sure we're hiring individuals to be more diverse and inclusive. We put them in the position as the director of DEI, but can we make sure that we have something in place to help create that type of workforce that we need in Metro?
And we may have more information that tomorrow when Mr. Pogue comes back to talk about his economic incentives.
Right, because see, I think it's something like that that we probably should have in ECD as opposed to putting a youth outreach person under ECD.
Talk about that as well. Other questions? If not, I will congratulate Director Flannery on getting us back on schedule, so thank you. Any other questions? If you think of questions, we can send them to Director Darby and answers can be put on the SharePoint. So with that, we are on schedule. Thank y'all for being here, and we'd like to invite the Arts Commission